Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Sham Kagod here. Now, before I start the discussion, if there is no issue with the sound, give me a thumbs up or say alphabet yes, or write a traditional method would be YES. Anything would be okay. Thanks a lot. So, this is a webinar. The coverage will be mains-based discussion. We'll have a discussion on mains-based current affairs from GS paper 3. I'm pretty sure all of you know what is the GS paper 3 all about. And most of you are worried or concerned about GS paper 3, not only in prelims but also in mains. Now, we are here to basically provide you the important articles which are there in the current affairs, again focused on the mains-based preparation. We'll be taking certain very important points, or let's say the concepts which were there in the last 1 month, that is in the month of August, from the economic angle, and let's have a thorough discussion. What kind of areas can be asked? What are the important points in these particular areas? What kind of question can be asked in UPSC? Let's have a thorough understanding of all of this. Now, before I start the discussion, if you have not yet done this, please download the Byju's Exam Prep app. Use your registered email or the mobile number to register on the app. It will take you to this particular page, or it will open up this window. In this window, there is a tab called as IAS. Press on this particular tab or click on the tab. It will take you to the next page, that is IAS. You're an English student, so please do choose or click on this tab. Now, basically, this new window will open up. Now, in this window, go to the bottom part, go to the home page. And in the home page, you can use this particular option or the tab of classroom. And if you go to this particular tab of classroom, all the materials that is required, relevant for you, for let's say in the form of PDFs, the notes, the unit test, the webinars, as well as other tablet videos will be accessible under this particular tab. So if you have not yet done this, please do that. This is one intimation I want to provide to you people. Now let's begin the discussion. The 5 topics that I'll be taking up, and we'll have a detailed discussion. All the 5 topics will be: 1, there has been a lot of discussion or the debate over the concept of hostile takeovers in the Indian economy. I'll give a context so that you understand. Adani and NDTV. Adani and NDTV. Right? So basically you must have read about it, heard of it, confused about it. What will happen now? What is this hostile takeover? Let's try and understand all the concepts here. Then there is this idea of a PSB bank privatization. What was there in the newspaper? Simple. One of the very famous economists has written a paper, we'll have a discussion on that, arguing that we must go for privatization of public sector banks. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Arvind Panigrahi. Mr. Arvind Panigrahi, along with another economist, has come out with a paper showing that rather than having public sector banks, we must privatize these public sector banks, except one bank, that is State Bank of India. At the same point of time, RBI also came out with one paper saying that PSBs play a very important role in the economy. We must not go for a full-fledged privatization of the PSBs. So there was a counter argument to what was proposed by Mr. Arvind Panigrahi. So now the question arises, what should Government of India do? If at all a question is asked by UPSC, what should be your viewpoint? For example, if UPSC will ask you, what do you think should be the view of the government, or what do you think are the reasons to go for privatization in the PSBs? What do you think are the reasons to go for, let's say, the same model of public sector banks in the economy? What should be your argument as well as counter argument? Let's study the threadbare this concept. Third, one of the deputy governors of Reserve Bank of India gave a lecture and stated that we must develop corporate bond market in India. And now what is this idea of a corporate bond market? Why do you need corporate bond market in the first place? What is the situation in India? Has RBI done anything to promote it? What are the problems? Let's try and understand. Then, one nation, one ration card. ONORC. One nation, one ration card. This scheme, which was implemented by the government back in 2019, has completed 3 years. Now, be very careful here. Most of you will simply read what is given in the newspaper and come to a conclusion. The scheme is working wonderfully well because the government has said so. In the newspaper, they have given so. You come to a conclusion, nothing wrong with the scheme. But UPSC, rather than simply asking you what are the benefits, what are the achievements of the scheme, will ask you to, let's say, critically evaluate the scheme. Will ask you what have been the hurdles, challenges for implementation of ONORC scheme. Let's try and understand that. And finally, one of the most important reforms of the century, most important reforms under the indirect taxation, goods and services tax. The GST, goods and services tax, has completed 5 years. Now, what we have achieved under GST in the last 5 years? Are there any concerns related to GST even today? If there are concerns, how should we address these particular concerns? What should be the way forward if at all a question is asked in UPSC? We will have a discussion on these particular areas. Let's start. The first very important topic that I'll discuss is the idea of hostile takeover. And this is a debate that has been happening. Adani company is trying to take over the NDTV, New Delhi Television. Now let me start with the basic idea here. What do you mean by hostile takeover? Now I'll give simple examples, understand it. Imagine 3 of you, let's say XYZ, 3 people will come together, start a company. Right? 3 of you will come together, launch a company, and let's say by God's grace, this particular company will function very well. You will basically issue shares also in the market, etc. Now what will happen is, one more company, let's say another company ABC, another company ABC wants to acquire your company. Another company ABC acquire your company. Now there are 2 ways they can acquire the company. One, they will come to you, hold negotiations with you, and they will basically give a proposal. They'll say that we will give you, let's say, 5,000 crore rupees, 8,000 crore rupees, etc. And will you be able to sell the company to us? Will you sell more than 50%, more than 60%, etc. Now, if you agree to it, you will enter into agreement, you will sell your ownership to another company, collect the money, and happily move out of the company. I'll give an example so that you understand. Walmart purchased Flipkart of India. I'm pretty sure all of you know this. Walmart company, it's a US based company, came to India and purchased an Indian company, that is a Flipkart. So Flipkart entered into negotiations, sold the company, collected huge amount of money, and the owners slowly and steadily moved out of the company. That is one way a company can be acquired by another company. But there is another way which is referred to as a hostile takeover. There is another way for this which is called as a hostile takeover. What happens in a hostile takeover? In a hostile takeover, you as the management of the company, you reject the offer. ABC has come to you, approached you, and they held negotiations and they said, we will give you, let's say, 5,000 crore rupees. Can you give us the ownership? Right? You simply said, no, we will not agree to this. Right? You have rejected the offer. Management has rejected the offer. Now, what this company ABC will do is, they will acquire the shares of the company from the shareholders. There are other shareholders. They will purchase the ownership of the company from other shareholders. So, what do you mean by this? There is a term called as equity. There is a term called as equity. Now, what do you mean by equity here? Equity simply refers to the shares, the ownership in the form of shares. Let's imagine there is a company XYZ. This company XYZ has issued 100 shares, normal shares by the way, because under the shares also there is a division, preference shares is there, shares with the differential voting rights is there. There are different types. Don't complicate. Imagine all the shares are one and the same, normal shares, equity shares by the way. Out of these particular equity shares, 100 units, imagine if you purchase, let's say 10 shares, you become 10% owner of the company. You become 10% owner of the company. And what is the use of being an owner? Whenever you have more than 50% ownership, remember this? Whenever you have more than 50% ownership, you will basically control the management. You will control the management of the company. So what they will do is, they will approach the management and the management will disapprove. Now what they will do is go to the shareholders, try to purchase shares from the shareholders. They'll try to purchase equity shares from the shareholders, thereby having ownership over the company here. If they do that, this is essentially called as hostile takeovers. This is referred to as a hostile takeover. What happens in a hostile takeover? The management of the company has disapproved. Without the approval of the management of the company, now the new company wants to purchase the ownership or wants to control the management of the new company. Now this is one way of taking a hostile over. This is one way. What is another way? Another way is ABC, the company ABC, acquiring company, rather than going to the shareholders and purchasing the shareholders or shares from the owners, they will ask the shareholders to remove the board of directors. I'll repeat the statement here. One way is basically, you are acquiring company, you will purchase the ownership from other shareholders. Another way is, rather than purchasing ownership, you will talk to the shareholders, convince them to throw out the existing management. Right? Basically remove the existing board of directors, appoint a new board of directors who are in favor of selling the company to the acquiring company. Hope you understand this? Either purchase the shares, you have the ownership, or else you will talk to the existing shareholders, make them remove the board of directors, appoint a new board of directors who are basically going to approve the trade deal or approve the agreement to sell the company or the ownership to the acquiring company. Either ways, this is called as a hostile takeover. In simple terms, a hostile takeover means acquiring the company's ownership or majority ownership of a new company without the approval of existing management. I will give you a definition now. Understand this? Right? This is basically acquiring an existing company without the approval of the management. The management doesn't approve, but you will never give a damn about them. You will go either ways and purchase the ownership. This is called as a hostile takeover. Now, what is there in the newspaper? What is there in the newspaper? Understand this. Here is a company X. Company X has given loan to company Y. I repeat, company X has given loan to company Y, and as per the agreement in the loan, company X says, I can convert this particular loan into equity. I will repeat the statement. I can convert this particular loan into equity. I'm using the term loan into equity. In the books, or let's say in the magazines, they will simply say debt into equity. As per this particular agreement, we can convert the debt into equity. Right? Debt means nothing but borrowing. So the loans can be converted into equity, that is ownership in a company. Now this is the first point. Second point, Y has ownership in the NDTV. How much ownership? Around 29%. Y has certain ownership in NDTV, around 29%. Now this company X was purchased by Adani company. The company X was purchased by Adani group of companies. Now very recently it was purchased. Now this company X says, because I've given loan to you, I will convert this particular loan into equity, which means I will own the company Y. Again, don't mug up the exact names. UPSC doesn't require it. You don't require those names for UPSC. X says, I will convert this debt into equity. I will have ownership of company Y now. And because I have the ownership of company Y has 29% ownership in NDTV. Please transfer this 29% to me. I'll repeat it again. Understand the concept here. X has given loan to Y. Y has ownership in NDTV. And this company X, when they gave loan, the agreement says, I can convert this debt into equity, loan into equity. And this option has been exercised by the company X, which means X will own the company Y. And Y, because it has ownership in NDTV, now X is saying, please transfer the ownership to me. Which simply means now Adani Group of companies will indirectly, I repeat, Adani Group of companies will indirectly hold 29% ownership in NDTV. That's the first point. Second point, apart from this, the Adani Group of companies also have stated, we offer to purchase a 26% of the shares in the market. I'll repeat it. If this deal goes through, if it is approved, 29% of NDTV's ownership will go to company X, which is owned by Adani. And apart from this, they also have stated, anybody else in the market has the shares of the NDTV, you can sell it to us. We will purchase 26% of the shares. Now let's say hypothetically this is also done. If you take both of the numbers, 29% here. Now some of you will say, sir, it is not 29, it is 29.18%. Right? Agreed. I don't focus on exact numbers. It is, let's say, 29%. Along with 29, another 26% you will be able to purchase now, which will basically convert your ownership in the NDTV to 55%, which is more than 51% ownership. And if you have 55%, you are the majority owner in the company. Now you can take decisions for the NDTV. You can control the functioning of NDTV. That is what has been discussed in the current affairs. Now let me go ahead. Basically, some of you are saying, sir, we have read all of this already. Now the question arises, what are the options available for NDTV then? If NDTV wants to escape from this, what are the options available for NDTV? These are the options. These are called as defenses against hostile takeover. Defenses against hostile takeover. Let's understand one by one. One is called as a poison pill mechanism. In fact, I'll tell you the current affairs also here. Earlier, in the context of Twitter and Elon Musk, the idea of poison pill was discussed. What do you mean by poison pill? Let's start with a simple example. Imagine here is a company X. There are 100 shares in the company X, and let's say the price per share is 10 rupee. What will be the market price now? What will be the market price? You want to purchase the company's shares, let's say all of them. What will be the price, market price you will have to pay now? 1000 rupees. In the poison pill mechanism, what happens is, the existing shareholders, the existing owners of the company, they will issue new shares, they will only purchase. I'll repeat the statement. The existing promoters of the company are issued shares which they will purchase. Imagine, rather than only 100 shares being there in the market, new 100 more shares are issued. Totally how many shares now? 200 shares. Now, if you want to go for a hostile takeover of this company, you'll have to pay how much now? It's not 1000 rupees now. You'll have to pay 2000 rupees. I'll repeat it. What do you mean by? Right? What is the idea of a poison pill? What do you mean by this? The existing shareholders, the promoters of the company, are purchasing more shares. They will issue and purchase these shares, which will make it very costly for you to go for purchasing of the company. You might simply say, I thought that I will have to pay only 1,000, but because of the poison pill, now I will have to pay 2,000 rupees. It doesn't work for me. I will not pay 2,000 rupees to purchase a company. No, I will not purchase it. So hostile takeover will be avoided. Second, green mail defense. Remember all of these. Remember all of these can be asked in UPSC mains. That's the reason I'm discussing all of this. Second one is green mail defense. What do you mean by green mail defense? Under the green mail defense, imagine there is a company X. You want to go for a hostile takeover of the company X. And let's say in this case, I'll take the current affairs itself so that you understand. Adani group of companies want to go for a hostile takeover of company NDTV. What the owners of NDTV, promoters of NDTV will do is, they will offer money to Adani itself and purchase the shares of NDTV. I'll repeat the statement here. Right, in the green mail defense, the existing owners or promoters of the company will offer money and purchase the shares of their company from acquiring company. That is called as a green mail defense. If NDTV's owners will offer money and purchase 29% from Adani, where is the question of hostile takeover here? There is no hostile takeover. Third one, crown jewel defense. Crown jewel defense. What do you mean by crown jewel defense? Let's start. Imagine you are a company, right? You have started a company, and in this company you are manufacturing these two products. Is it okay? You are a company, manufacturing company by the way. You have produced these two products, and out of these particular two products, it is this remote control which generates maximum amount of revenue. Out of, let's say, 100 crore rupees revenue that you have generated, let's say 70 crore rupees comes through the sale of remote control itself. Now, I want to go for a hostile takeover of your company. I want to go for hostile takeover of the company. Because you are concerned about hostile takeover, what you will do is, the division or the part of the company which manufactures this remote control, you will sell it to somebody else. I'll repeat the statement. The part of the company or the division in the company which manufactures this remote control, you will sell it to somebody else. Right? Why are you selling it? 70% of the revenues came from this product itself. If you are going to sell it to somebody else, will it make attractive proposition, or will this company become attractive for me to go for a hostile takeover? No. Why? The main product which generated revenues has been sold to somebody else. This is called as a crown jewel defense. This is referred to as a crown jewel. Crown jewel means what? Here it represents the most important part of the business. It represents the most important, or let's say the most part of the company which provides the most of the revenues for the company. If you are going to sell it to somebody else, for me, it doesn't make any sense to purchase your company now. That is called as a crown jewel defense. Let me go to the next one. Pac-Man defense. Pac-Man defense. What is a Pac-Man defense? Right, I'll take the same example. NDTV is here. Adani is here. Adani is trying to go for a hostile takeover of NDTV. Now what NDTV will do is, they will purchase the ownership in Adani company itself. I'll repeat the statement here. Adani is trying to go for a hostile takeover of NDTV. What NDTV will try to do is, start purchasing the ownership in the Adani companies. As a result of this, what will happen? Adani is concerned about his own company. Now they are concerned about the ownership of their own company. It might happen that in the process of acquiring NDTV, NDTV might end up acquiring Adani group of companies. This is called as a Pac-Man defense. And in the Pac-Man defense, what we generally expect is, Adani is concerned and they will withdraw, right? They will basically move away from going for a hostile takeover. And finally, White Knight defense. The last one is White Knight defense. What do you mean by a white knight defense? NDTV, I'll take the same example and continue. NDTV will approach one more company, let's say XYZ, enter into a deal to sell ownership to XYZ. I'll repeat the statement here. What do you mean by white knight, right? The defense? NDTV will approach an investor, another company which is very friendly to them, and they will enter into agreement to sell majority of ownership to this new company XYZ. Now, because this new company XYZ is very friendly to NDTV and comes to the rescue of NDTV, this is called as white knight defense. Right? So these are the 5. Are these the only 5 defenses against a hostile takeover? No. There are many other types. For example, there is a parachute, golden parachute option. In a golden parachute option, imagine Adani group of companies will purchase NDTV, then they will have to provide lot of benefits to the existing board of directors, to the existing promoters of the company. That will make them very costly to acquire this particular company. Right? So this is basically some of the defenses that you can use to prevent the bid of hostile takeover. Done? Right? So this is the discussion regarding the concept of the hostile takeover. I've given a descriptive question here. What is a hostile takeover? What are the barriers against it? Right? What is a hostile takeover? What are the barriers to prevent, right? To prevent the hostile takeover. Done? This is a discussion regarding hostile takeover. Please be very careful. I've discussed this in detail for a simple reason. Current affairs, there have been 2 instances. Twitter, right, being tried to purchased by Mr. Elon Musk, that is also hostile takeover. In India, NDTV is hostile takeover by Adani company. Right, so suddenly UPSC can ask the questions on this. Please be very careful. Now let me try and address some of the questions that you people have asked. Don't we have our right to own the company? Yes, you have the right. Imagine you're owner of the company. As per the system that we have, if you have more than 50% of the ownership with yourself, you can control the company. You can control the management of the company. But if somebody else purchases more than 50% of the ownership, it is their control. They will have the control over the company. That is the basic idea. Is hostile takeover illegal? No, hostile takeover is not illegal. It is perfectly legal. In Crown Jewel defense, the company sells somehow and not saved. In Crown Jewel, right, imagine you are the owner. I want to go for a hostile takeover of your company. At any cost, you want to protect your company. You do not want to sell it to me. So what you will do is the most profitable part of the company, most profitable, you will simply sell it to somebody else. So that the remaining part of the company, no doubt they are also promoting or they are earning profit, but they do not generate the amount of profit that the earlier unit would have generated. So for me as a buyer, purchasing this company doesn't make any rationality. It doesn't make any sense. So I will simply back out. Can you explain the green mail defense? I'll repeat it. In a green mail defense, what happens is, I'll write it in a separate slide. In a green mail defense, imagine there is a company XYZ and there is a company ABC. ABC wants to go for hostile takeover of XYZ. Now what XYZ will do is, imagine right now ABC has 25% shares of the company XYZ. So owners of XYZ will approach ABC, give an offer to purchase a 25% shares of their own company. Hope you understand this? Imagine you are XYZ, I am ABC. I have 25%. I want to purchase more, go for a hostile takeover. But what you will do is, you will approach me and say, sir, rather than going for more purchases, I will give you this much amount of money. Will you transfer the ownership back to me? If you can do that, right, I will have not any number of shares. I will not have any number of shares in the company XYZ. So where is the question of going for a hostile takeover now? Right, so that is the basic idea of, right, the concept of the green mail defense. Poison pill, right? Basically, you are asking me to repeat the whole topic. Poison pill simply means, I'll repeat it here. In the context of poison pill, what happens is, imagine there is a company XYZ. It has 100 shares. I have purchased, let's say, 25 shares. If I purchase 30 more shares, I will have more than 50% ownership in XYZ. Now, what you will do is, being the owners or being the promoters of the company, in addition to existing 100 shares, you will issue 100 more shares. You will issue 100 more shares, which means now totally the company has 200 shares. Now, earlier, understand this, earlier when there were only 100 shares, I could purchase 55 shares and I will have 55% ownership. But now because there are 200 shares, if I want to control 55%, I will not be owning it with only 55 shares. I cannot own 55% with 55 shares. Now with 200 shares, if I want to have 55% control, I need to purchase 110 shares. So will it become costly for me? Will I have to pay more money? Of course, yes. That is the reason the buyers or the acquirers will move away rather than purchasing, because it has become very, very costly for them. Done? So this is the discussion regarding hostile takeover. Let me go to the next very important article of discussion. PSB bank privatization. PSB bank privatization. Sir, what is the meaning of PSB here? I'll write the long forms here itself. Please make a note of this. Public sector banks. Public sector banks. PSB stands for public sector banks. And I'll start using another short form, PVB, private sector banks. Private sector banks. PSB and PVB. What is the basic difference? In the PSB, Government of India will have majority ownership. In PVB, it's the private sector which has the majority of ownership. Now, why do we need to discuss this? Precisely because of this. Mr. Arvind Panagiria has recommended that we should go for bank privatization. Now, what is this idea of privatization? Simply follow the argument here. There are two terms, nationalization and privatization. Nationalization and privatization. What do you mean by nationalization? Nationalization simply means ownership will be transferred. Ownership will be transferred from the private sector to the government. I repeat, ownership will be transferred from the private sector to the government. Sir, any example? Earlier, Air India was nationalized. Earlier, not in the recent times. In recent times, it has been privatized. I'll come to that. Earlier, Air India was nationalized. Coal sector was nationalized. Banking sector was nationalized. What about privatization? What do you mean by privatization here? In privatization, the ownership will be transferred from the government to the private sector. From the government to the private sector. That is privatization. Any current affairs example? Air India. Very recently, Air India was sold by Government of India to Tata Company. That is privatization. Now, why are we discussing all of this? Very simple. 2 years ago, Government of India has come out with a new policy of disinvestment. Remember this also. Government of India has come out with a new policy of disinvestment. What happens in the new policy of disinvestment? Government of India has divided all the sectors into strategic and non-strategic. Government of India has divided all these sectors into strategic and non-strategic. And government says, whichever sector is classified under strategic, best example, banking sector. At the maximum, we will have 4 ownership units. I will repeat the statement here. Whichever is classified as strategic, in this, I will have maximum 4 companies. That's it. Sir, what if you have more than 4 companies today? Government says we'll go for mergers. We'll go for amalgamations and we will reduce the number to maximum 4. And what about non-strategic sectors? Any sector which is classified as non-strategic, in that Government of India will not have any ownership. If there's a company owned by the government which is a part of the non-strategic sector, this will be privatized. This will be closed down if it cannot be privatized. This is the most recent policy regarding the disinvestment. Please make a note of this. Now, what is the argument? Why are we discussing that we should go for PSB privatization? I'll give you point by point. Follow this very carefully. First one, in case of public sector banks, there is always a problem of dual regulation or dual control. Dual regulation or dual control. Right? What do you mean by dual control here? Here is a public sector bank such as SBI, State Bank of India. Majority of the ownership, that is more than 50% of the ownership in SBI is held by Government of India. Done? More than 50% of it is held by Government of India. But this is regulated by Reserve Bank of India. SBI, just like any other bank, is regulated by RBI. There is very often, there is this particular concept of a duality of control here. What do you mean duality of control? Government of India will issue certain directives for SBI. Government of India will ask SBI to do something. The head of SBI is appointed by Government of India. And many of the times, to achieve social welfare objectives, I'll give an example. Many of the times, to achieve a social welfare objective, Government of India will use the public sector banks. So what do you mean by social welfare objective here? All of you heard of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana? I'm pretty sure all of you heard of this. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, majority of the accounts, that is around 78% of the accounts under PMJDY have been opened in the public sector banks. They have been opened in the public sector banks. So Government of India, in order to achieve a lot of social welfare measures, will use the public sector banks. Then RBI says, what is my role here? What is my role? You want me to regulate it, but you are giving the directions. In case of, let's say, a private sector bank, RBI has the power to remove certain members. If, let's say, board of directors, if the CEO, if they are not working very well, then RBI simply can tell the bank, remove this person. I will not allow him to continue or her to continue in this particular position. I'll give an example, you'll understand it quickly. Mr. Rana Kapoor of Yes Bank, Mrs. Chandra Kochar of ICICI Bank. The Reserve Bank of India was dead against their appointment and they were removed. But what happens in a public sector bank? RBI doesn't have powers there. Reserve Bank of India doesn't have powers. The appointment, removals, etc. is done by Government of India. So don't you think when RBI wants to regulate, understand my statement here, don't you think when RBI wants to regulate, it has to use one set of measures for private sector bank, another set of measures for public sector bank, right? How does it work out? That will create problems in the public sector banks. Second very important reason, Government of India provides a lot of assistance to public sector bank. I'll use a term here, PSB recapitalization. PSB recapitalization. What do you mean by PSB recapitalization? Government of India owns majority of the stake in the public sector bank. If a public sector bank is closed down, it is forced to shut down, that is a very bad outcome. Government of India will not allow it. What Government of India does is provides a lot of capital, infuses a lot of capital. Capital is nothing but money here. Provides a lot of capital or infusing money into public sector banks. And this is very much specifically applicable for public sector banks. Government doesn't do the same for private sector bank. But what is the problem here? One, only public sector banks will get the capital. But more importantly, this is a taxpayer money. More importantly, this is taxpayers' money. You have paid income taxes. I have paid income taxes. We have paid GST, etc. Government of India is using the taxpayer money to infuse capital in a public sector bank. If SBI is not working very well, it is their mistake. If another public sector bank is not working very well, it is their mistake. Why should Government of India use our money to infuse capital? Is the argument valid or not valid? Let me know. Right? Government of India is collecting money from us and infusing that in a public sector bank. Why will I agree to it? Right? I will oppose it. Second reason. Third very important reason, the non-performing assets, NPAs. The non-performing assets are very high in the public sector banks. Compared to private sector banks, the non-performing assets are very, very high. Sir, how can you connect NPA with argument of going for privatization? If NPAs are very high, the losses incurred by PSBs could also be very high. And if the losses are very high, again the Government of India is supposed to provide assistance, infuse capital. We will not agree to it. Next, fourth very important point. Right, understand this very carefully. In the context of the employees in the public sector banks, they are not given bonus. They are not given part of the profit of the public sector bank. Their salaries compared to let's say an employee in a private sector bank, salary is lower. Have you understand this? The argument is simple. In case of public sector banks, imagine you are a high paid employee or highest level employee. You are part of the very important team there. But when you compare how much salary you are making compared to your friend who is also doing the same work in a private sector bank, your salary is much lower. In case of private sector bank, he will be able to earn incentives. You are not given incentives in the PSBs. So package is lower. Incentives are absent. Now tell me, if you are this employee, simple question, if you are this employee, do you have any incentive to work more? I hope you understand this. Do you have any incentive to work more? Create new systems, right? Implement new measures. No incentives are there. That is the first issue. But imagine something goes wrong in the public sector bank. Government officials such as let's say CID or CBI for that matter, CVC, they will conduct investigations against you, put you behind the bars. Has it happened? Of course, yes. Many of the times it has happened. Now you are the highest employee or you are the one of the very, very big designated employee in a PSB. Something wrong has happened. Government has initiated investigation. You have been arrested. What is the impact of that on others in the bank? What kind of impact it will create amongst others? Others will say, Arey Baba, if I do something, then Government of India will initiate action against me. They will investigate, etc. That will deter, that will basically negatively affect the performance of employees in the public sector bank. Next one, compared to PSBs, the private sector banks are performing very well now. That is one of the very important arguments. Compared to PSBs, right, the banks, that is the private sector banks, are performing very, very well. How do I prove it? Follow the points carefully. Back in 1991, the public sector banks accounted for around 90% of the assets. Out of the total assets in the banking sector, the public sector banks accounted for more than 90% of the asset, whereas the private sector banks accounted for around 4.2% of the assets. But by 2021, the private sector banks today are accounting for around 32% of the assets, and the public sector banks are accounting for around 60% of the assets, which means the performance of the private sector banks has improved and they are basically taking more and more market share in the market. Let me give you another example here. If you take the last 5 years, in public sector bank, more than 80,000 jobs have been lost. In the PSBs, more than 80,000 jobs have been lost. Whereas private sector banks have created around 2.3 lakh jobs. Now, if you look at all of these parameters, simple question to you people, who is working better? Is it the public sector bank which is working better or the private sector bank which is working better? Obviously, the answer is very simple, straightforward, private sector banks. That is the reason the author says, Mr. Arvind Panigrahi says, then why don't you convert all the PSBs into private sector bank? Why don't you simply convert these PSBs into private sector bank? You don't have to do it in a lump sum manner, right? Immediately you don't have to do, because there are a lot of compulsions in the market, right? You have to address the people also, the concerns of the people. There are political compulsions. So you don't have to do it immediately, but except the SBI, convert all the PSBs into private sector bank. These are the reasons which have been quoted by the author to convert the PSBs into private sector bank. Let me go to the counterpoint. What should be your counterpoints to all of this? You will have to say, no sir, because of point A, B, C and D, no, we don't have to go for privatization. PSBs are much better. First very important point. The earlier argument is lot of crisis is there in the public sector bank, right? The NPAs are very high. Government of India is infusing capital. So there is a crisis in the banking sector. But what the argument here is, the crisis in the banking sector is not just present in India. It is a normal phenomenon across all the other countries. Have you understand this? Right? There is a crisis. Nobody is denying that. Public sector banks are incurring a lot of losses. There is a crisis. But this is not just happening in India. It is happening across many other countries. For example, as per one of the IMF reports, between 1970 to let's say 2021, there have been 140 instances of banking crisis. I'll repeat the statement. There have been 140 instances of banking crisis. So it is not just happening in India, it is happening across the global market as well. Second very important point is, the public sector banks play a very important role in promoting financial inclusion. I'll repeat the statement here. The public sector banks play a very, very important role in promoting financial inclusion. Right? What do you mean by financial inclusion here? The public sector banks have a huge number of ATMs in rural India. I'll repeat the statement. The public sector banks have a huge number of ATMs in rural India. Second, public sector banks account for 78% of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, PMJDY accounts. The public sector banks have the highest number of branches in rural India. And in terms of lending, lot of loans are given by the public sector bank to rural sector, agriculture sector, MSME sector and industries. And this is another reason which we state and say that no, we must not go for privatization. Rather, we must have these particular public sector banks. Third very important point. Right? Third very important point is, there is this argument, earlier I've given it. There is this argument that NPAs, non-performing assets in the public sector banks are very high. But there is a solution for it. What is the solution? We have set up, follow this very carefully, we have set up a mechanism of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, IBC. We have set up a mechanism of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and using IBC, we are trying to address the NPA issue. In addition to this, we also have set up NARCL, National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Using NARCL, we are trying to address the NPA issue. Right? So what is the counter argument here? You say that there are crises in the banking sector. It is normal. It happens across many other countries. You say that public sector banks are not working efficiently. Look at the role they are playing in terms of financial inclusion. They have the highest number of branches in rural part of India. They have the highest number of ATMs in villages. Right? They also give lot of loans to agriculture sector. And the fourth very important point is, remember this very carefully. During recession in the last 2 years, the private sector banks have reduced their loans. Right? I'll repeat the statement. During a slowdown or recession that happened in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, the private sector banks were concerned about losses. They have reduced the amount of loans they have given to industries, whereas the public sector banks have issued huge amount of loans to industries. And this is important. Understand the reason. This is important. Why? Follow the cycle here. Follow the cycle. Imagine you are a bank. Imagine you are a bank. You will give loan to an industry. What is the outcome? Start answering. What is the outcome? When you give loan to an industry, let's say a company, the owner of the company will purchase raw materials. If there is a problem related to the cycle, let me know. Raw materials, purchase machinery, etc. They will produce goods, create jobs. And when you create jobs, the houses will have lot of salary now. And when the houses will have money to spend, they will demand more and more goods and services. And when they demand more and more goods and services, production again increases. You will come to the starting point again. So this is a cycle like this, right? The name of the cycle is very simple, virtuous cycle. This is called as virtuous cycle. So there will be, right, a start of virtuous cycle. And that is the role which has been played by public sector banks. So during a pandemic, it was the public sector banks which gave lot of loans to industries. When the private sector bank was concerned about the losses, reduce the loans. Right? So that is one more very important role that has been played by public sector banks in order to promote recovery in the economy. So the counter arguments are these. So finally, what is the way forward then? What is the way forward? Right? Understand this. The way forward should be simply this. The public sector banks have their own space in the banking sector as well as economy in India. They have a very important role to play, rather than government of India simply deciding that we must simply privatize all of them. Government of India should consider all the roles, or let's say the important roles that are played by the PSBs, right? After that, take a decision. Because if you convert all of these into private sector banks, understand this carefully. If you convert all of these PSBs into private sector banks, private sector bank, answer to my question, will be focused on the welfare or profit. Right? The question is very simple. The private sector will be focused on the welfare or the profit. Obviously, the answer is simple. They are focused on profit. Then who will take care of the welfare? Who will take care of the welfare? There are a lot of villages in India. For example, right, have a look at the data here. There are more than 6 lakh villages in India. And all the villages do not have branches. That is bank branches. They do not have a branch. In fact, there are thousands of the villages which do not have a bank branch in a vicinity of 5 kilometers, in a distance of 5 kilometers like this. So if you simply privatize all of them, they are not concerned about welfare. And some of you will simply say, sir, how can you connect the branches with welfare here? Let me ask you a very simple question. You're a private sector bank. Where will you open more branches? In a rural part of India or urban part of India? In villages or cities? Very simple. All of you will say, sir, cities, urban. Why? In urban part of India, You can simply collect a lot of the deposits. You can give lot of loans, earn a lot of profit. That is the precise reason you'll focus on the profit, not on the welfare. That should be your way forward here. Done? So I've given a question here. Rather than a big bang privatization of the PSPs, there is a need for a calibrated approach. Elaborate in 250 words. Right? So this is a question that I've asked. Now I've discussed in detail what is the argument against, what is the argument in favor, etc. You need to put all of this in 250 words. That is a challenge for you. You need to put all of this in 250 words. Done? So let me go to the next important article. I'll be discussing corporate bond market. But before that, let me take up certain questions from your side. So then Greenmail Defense and Pacman, no, both are not one and the same. In Greenmail, whatever shares of your company, right, the other company has, you are purchasing. In Pacman, you will start purchasing the shares of other company. I'll give you an example. If I say Greenmail, NDTV will purchase its own shares from Adani. But if I say Pacman, NDTV will start purchasing the ownership of Adani company. Both are different, both are not one and same. What role does SEBI have in this takeover? Right? Generally, again, there is a technical concept that there is one notification that was issued by SEBI, which was barring some of the promoters from selling the stake. That is there in the discussion, very technical, not required for UPSC. Dual control means both RBI also has the role of regulation and Government of India being the owner will also get involved and start giving directions to public sector bank. In fact, I'm reminded of one of the statement that was given by Mr. Urjit Patel. Mr. Urjit Patel in one of the speeches stated that the regulation of the public sector bank should be ownership neutral. I'll repeat the statement here. The regulation of the banking sector should be ownership neutral. Meaning what? Who is the owner? Doesn't matter. Government of India is the owner? Doesn't matter. Regulation should be given to me. That is the meaning of the statement. NPAs connect to privatization. The NPAs in the private sector banks are comparatively lesser. First point. Second, if NPAs keep on increasing, losses also keep on increasing. Now, because the public sector banks are having the backing of the government, if they are incurring losses, Government of India will infuse the capital, which is not done in a private sector bank. So that is the issue there. In case of non-performing asset, the banks can sell those assets under SARFAESI Act. Then there will be no losses to the bank. No, right? Not at all. Please understand this. In the context of SARFAESI Act, you can sell the asset. But what if you wanted to have a recovery? You expected recovery of, let's say, 100 rupees. Under SARFAESI, you got the recovery of only 5 rupees. Has it happened? Of course, yes, it has happened earlier. So there is a problem. Either you talk about IBC, ARCs, SARFAESI Act, recoveries are very, very low, right? Generally around 30% and below 30%. Sir, who do you support on the privatization of the PSPs? What is your viewpoint? Doesn't matter. Based on the question, you answer. If the question says there is a need to go for privatization of the PSPs, you know the reasons, what should be done, write it. If the question says government should reconsider the idea of privatization of the public sector bank, you have the idea, you have the points, write it. Based on the demand of the question, you decide what should be the answer. The barriers against the hostile takeover or the company's defenses? Yes. Okay, let me go to the next one. Corporate bond market. The idea of corporate bond market. Why am I discussing this idea of corporate bond market? Simple. Have a look at the article here. Corporate bond markets need to be more accessible to lower rated borrowers. There was one speech given by Deputy Governor of RBI, And that is the reason this whole concept of corporate bond market has become very much relevant now. Let me start the discussion. Now imagine you are a private developer. You want to borrow and construct a national highway. NH is national highway. Now start answering yourself. You don't have to write it. Start answering yourself. Do you want to invest a very small amount of money or large amount of money here? Obviously, you will have to invest huge amount of money, large amount of money first. Second, you want to borrow for short duration or you want to borrow for long duration? Your answer should be, sir, I want to borrow for longer duration. Right? Some of you will get confused. Why, sir? Why should I invest large amount of money? Why should I borrow for longer duration? Let me explain. Imagine you want to construct a 100-kilometer stretch of a national highway, which will not cost you, let's say, 5 lakh or 10 lakh. It will cost you, let's say, 100 crore rupees. 100 crore rupees. Right? So first point is you will have to invest a lot of money. Second, in a month, in let's say 3 months, you cannot construct this infrastructure. It is not possible. So you will have to borrow for longer duration, maybe 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years. This you will have to remember. You will have to remember. Why? Infrastructure borrowers or infrastructure development requires one, huge amount of investment, and the borrowing that is done for very much longer duration. But there's a problem related to this when the banks will give loans. Today, majority of this investment, a large chunk of the investment for infrastructure comes from banking sector. But there is a problem. What is the problem? Imagine you own a bank, you have a bank. You will collect deposits from the people, you will give loans. Is the system okay with you? You will collect the deposits from the people and you will give notes. You will basically give loans. Now the problem is simple. When you borrow, when you collect a deposit from the people, you will collect these deposits, let's say for 1 year, 2 years, etc. like this. But when you give loans, right, to the market for infrastructure developers like this, you will give loans for 10 years, you will give loans for 15 years, etc. This is called as asset liability mismatch. I'll repeat the statement here. This is referred to as asset liability mismatch. Right, sir? What do you mean by asset liability mismatch? In short, ALM, asset liability mismatch. Right? Basically, the idea of asset liability mismatch is this. As a bank, you have collected deposits, which are your liabilities. The tenure of the deposits is 2 years, 3 years. And you've given a loan in the market. The tenure of the loan, which is an asset for you, is 10 years, 12 years. This is called as asset liability mismatch. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. The asset's tenure is different. The liability tenure or the maturity period is different. This is called as ALM, asset liability mismatch. And this is a problem, by the way. This is a problem. Why, sir? Why it is a problem? Let's take a very, very simple example. Very simple example. You will quickly understand it. Imagine I've taken loan from you 100 rupees and I said I will give it back in 2 days. I took that 100 rupee, gave it to somebody else for, let's say, 20 days. Now after 2 days you will come to me, ask me for 100 rupees. Do you think I have the money? I hope you understand this. Do you think I have the money? No, I will have to borrow from someone else. I will have to pay interest on it. This is the problem. So the banks have collected money from you for short duration. They have given loans for longer duration. This is the problem referred to as asset liability mismatch. Done? Now, come to this. There is a need to develop a corporate bond market. Right? Why there is a requirement? Here is a bank. If you go to the bank and borrow for infrastructure development, there is a problem of ALM. How do you address it? Rather than borrowing from the banking sector, what if I issue bonds in the market? What if I issue bonds in the market, borrow for longer duration? I hope you understand this. Rather than going to the bank and borrowing from the bank, what if I issue bonds, long-term bonds in the market and borrow from the market? Don't you think the pressure on the banking sector will come down? I'm asking a question to you people. Rather than taking a loan from a bank, you will borrow from the bond market. Will the pressure on the banking sector come down? Yes. Will the issue of asset liability mismatch be addressed? Yes. That is exactly the objective here. So understand this. What is the need for developing a corporate bond market? One, it will address the issue of asset liability mismatch in the banking sector. Definitely, yes, it will help. Second, the corporate bond market will also provide one more source for the borrowers to borrow for longer duration. They don't have to always depend on the banking sector. They will have one more market where they can borrow for longer duration. Third one, whenever the bond market is developed, by the way, in case of India, bond market is not very well developed. I'll address it. Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. I'll address that also. By the way, in case of India, bond market is not very well developed. Right? So whenever the bond market is very well developed, lot of sellers are there, lot of buyers are there, lot of issuers are there, competition or the participation will be very high. And when the participation is very high, interest rates are very, very competitive. Interest rates are comparable to other markets. So it will also help in reducing the cost of borrowing for companies. And finally, it will help the long-term investors. In the market, remember this, there is a long-term set of investors. For example, sir, who are the long-term investors here? Example for long-term investors are insurance companies. Insurance companies, it is a long-term investor. Right? For example, pension funds, pension fund companies, these are also long-term investors. These are also long-term investors. So these are also searching for certain areas where they can invest for longer duration. Now imagine you are one of these investors who wants to invest for 10 years, 12 years, 8 years, etc. I am giving you a bond, I am selling a bond which maturity has is 10 years. Will you not prefer these types of bonds? Of course, yes. So this will also provide one more market where long-term investors can purchase, can invest as per their requirement. So these are the reasons as to why we need to develop the bond market in India or corporate bond market in India. But what is the situation? What is the situation? Currently, what is the situation? First, very important point, remember this. As per the latest data, that is for financial year 2022, latest data, the total value of the bonds which have been issued by the companies is around 40 lakh crore rupees. I'll repeat the statement. The total value of the bonds which are there in the market as of financial year 2022 issued by the private sector companies is 40 lakh crore rupees. And if you compare it to earlier situation, that is 10 years ago, it was equivalent to 10 lakh crore rupees. 10 years ago, the value of the bonds which were there in the market was 10 lakh crore rupees. Now it is how much? 40 lakh crore rupees. Many of you looking at the data will come to a conclusion, then sir, in the last 10 years, bond market has improved a lot. But when you compare it to other markets, I'll prove that also, just give me some time. When you compare it to other markets, this is not a very good improvement. There needs to be a huge improvement in the market. I will discuss that also, I'll prove it. Just give me some time. Second, out of all the bonds which have been issued in the last 1 year, I'll repeat the statement. Out of all the bonds which have been issued in the last 1 year, more than 95% value of the bonds have been issued by those companies which have a credit rating of either AA or AAA. I hope you understand this concept of, right, the credit rating. Credit rating means what? Credit rating represents credit worthiness of the borrower. For example, imagine you will go to a bank, apply for a loan. Do you think the bank will simply give a loan to you without checking your background, without checking what is your salary, etc.? Will they give you simply the loan like this? Absolutely no. They will check what is your CRISIL rating, right? That is credit, not CRISIL, CIBIL rating. They will check your CIBIL rating. They will check how much loans you have taken in the past. They will check what is your salary now, how much of the salary is variable pay, how much is a fixed pay, etc. So there are a lot of background checks which are run. Only then they will determine, okay, to this person I can give a loan because they will give the loan back. In the same way, in the market also, whenever these instruments are issued, we generally say that if the issuer has got a very good credit rating, then they can easily borrow from the market. Sir, what do you mean by this? Remember this. There are various rating agencies in the market, right? For example, there is a S&P, right? There is a CIBIL, etc. And they will give you credit rating. If you have a credit rating of AAA, means you have the highest safety. I'll repeat the statement. If you have a credit rating of AAA, you are offering highest safety in the market. And if you have a credit rating of C or D, then basically lowest credit rating. It is as good as saying to whom you are giving loans. Are they, right, credit worthy, more credit worthy, or less credit worthy? Is it safe to give them loans? Are you taking higher risk or lower risk? So I'll repeat it again. Out of all the bonds issued in the last 1 year, out of all the bonds which have been issued in the last 1 year, 95% of the value of the bonds have got a very good credit rating, AA and AAA. What is the problem? What is the problem with all of this? Problem is simple. Have a look at the next point. Problems one by one I'll discuss. Have a look at all of these points, important. One, if I say 95% of the value of the bonds have either a AA or AAA rating, what is the problem there? What if there is a small company which has a low credit rating? I will repeat the statement here. What if there is a small company which has very low credit rating? It has, let's say, BBB, BB, right, or C for that matter. What should they do? Will they be able to borrow from the market? No, right, because 95% of the bonds which have been sold are of very high grade, very good quality. Smaller companies which have very low rating, which require a lot of money to invest, they will not be able to get access to. These kind of funds. Any problem related to this? Let me know. Right? Any problem related to this? What is meant by BBB and AAA? Right? I believe you are already preparing for the exams. There is an idea of credit rating. Under credit rating, the companies will give you certain rating, right, in the form of AAA, BBB, etc. Now let me check whether you people are reading the newspapers or not. We will give you the current affairs, but let me check, are you reading the newspapers or not? Very recently, sovereign credit rating of India was published. What is the sovereign credit rating of India? I'm checking your answers, by the way. Very recently, sovereign credit rating of India was published by a rating agency. What is the sovereign credit rating? Right? What is the sovereign credit rating of India? BBB. Right? BBB is the sovereign credit rating of India. So please be very careful. What I'm discussing, again, it is there in the current affairs. I have not picked something else from Mars. It is there in the current affairs. Please be very, very careful. Let's start. Lot of these particular bonds which have been issued have got very good credit rating. What about those companies which have low credit rating? They are unable to borrow from the corporate bond market. Second, investor base is very, very narrow. Right? What do you mean by narrow investor base? You can purchase the bonds. Understand this. You, that is individuals, can purchase a bond. I can purchase a bond. Mutual fund companies can purchase bonds. Banks, insurance companies, foreign investors, right? There are a lot of investors who can purchase these particular bonds. But most of the times, the bonds which are purchased in Indian market are by institutions. I'll repeat the statement. These particular bonds are mainly purchased by institutions, companies. Right? Until now, I'm pretty sure many of you are confused saying that, sir, can I purchase a bond? I did not know it. Many of you will say this. Can I purchase a government bond? I did not know that. Am I eligible to purchase a corporate bond? I did not know it. That is the problem here. The investors, especially the retail investors, they are not purchasing these bonds. These investments into the bond market from retail investors are very, very low. Sir, what is the problem if these are very low? What is the problem? Simple. If more and more investors go to the market, what will happen to competition? Hope you understand this. If more and more investors, you also want to purchase, I also want to purchase, the banks also wants to purchase, insurance companies, mutual fund companies, everybody wants to purchase. Don't you think the price discovery of the bonds will be much better? Competition will be much higher. Many other companies looking at the market, they will also feel that, okay, I can issue the bonds in the market, I can borrow from the market. That is what is expected. But in case of Indian market, the investor base, especially the retail investor base, is very, very narrow. People do not have the information. They do not have the knowledge regarding this. Secondary market issue is also there. What do you mean by secondary market issue? Imagine you purchased a bond. You purchased a bond, you want to sell it now. You have purchased a bond, right? You want to sell it. That is called as a secondary market. If you understand this, you have purchased a bond, let's say government bond, or you have purchased a corporate sector bond, private sector bond by the way, you want to sell it to someone else. There is no demand for these kind of bonds again in the market. Reselling is very, very low. I'll repeat the statement. Reselling means what? You will have a bond, you will sell it to me. I will sell it to someone else. The third person will sell it to fourth person. This is called as a secondary market. These kind of transactions are very, very low in Indian market. What is the problem with this? If the secondary market is also very high, very well developed, right, the demand for these bonds automatically will increase. For example, let me give a very simple example here. All of you heard of Bombay Stock Exchange? All of you heard of Bombay Stock Exchange? National Stock Exchange? What is this Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange? These are nothing but secondary markets itself. These are nothing but secondary markets. And don't you think BSA, Bombay Stock Exchange, is very well developed? A National Stock Exchange in India is very well developed. Lot of shares are sold, purchased, investment is very high, etc. But that doesn't happen in the corporate bond market. That is the problem. And have a look at this. The bonds cannot be used for repo transactions. Right? What do you mean by repo transactions here? Imagine you want to purchase or you want to take a loan. Now you will have to give a security. I hope you understand this. You want to take a loan, you want to give a security. There is a repo, right? I hope you know the concept of repo under RBI. Right? RBI will give a loan and collect a security or collateral from the public sector banks or by any bank. So logic is simple. Whenever RBI gives a loan to a bank, they will collect government bonds. They don't collect the corporate sector bonds or a private sector bond. So these kind of bonds, even if a bank wants to invest and wants to purchase, banks cannot use them in repo transactions. Rather, on the other hand, they know that government bonds can be utilized in the repo. Now imagine you are the manager. You are the manager of a bank. Will you purchase more of government bonds or private sector bonds? When I am saying you can use government bonds for repo transactions, will you purchase or will you prefer more of government bonds or private sector bond? Obviously, you will prefer more of government bonds. And that is a precise reason. I'll give you facts now. Understand the facts very carefully. That is the precise reason. More and more out of the bond market, more than 70% of these bonds are of government. This is a fact. Remember this. Right? Remember this. It's a fact, by the way. Out of the total bonds in the market, more than 70% of these bonds are the bonds issued by the government. Corporate sector, that is the private sector bonds, are very, very low in India. What are the reasons? These are some of the reasons. I'll give you a couple of more facts here. Please remember all of these facts. In the context of the bond segment, that is a corporate sector, private sector bonds, the penetration in India, I'll use a statement now. The penetration in India is somewhere around 18%. Right? I'm using a statement, I'll explain it. The penetration of private sector bonds, that is a corporate sector bond, is 18%. What do you mean by this? If the GDP value is 100 rupees, the corporate sector or the private sector is issuing 18 rupees worth of bonds in India. Sir, how do we come to a conclusion that the penetration is lower? Look at China. In case of China, the penetration of corporate sector bonds is 36%. In USA, the penetration is 120%. In Korea, it is 80%, which means the private sector there, that is a corporate sector, is issuing more and more bonds, borrowing from the market. And let me ask you a very simple question. If corporate sector, that is a private sector, borrows, is it a good indicator or a bad indicator? Let me see how you people analyze all of this. If the private sector, that is a corporate sector, borrows money, is it a good indicator or a bad indicator? Obviously, it has to be a good indicator. Why? If the private sector borrows, investment increases. Somebody says bad. Please follow this. Right? If the private sector borrows more money, investment increases. It will lead to higher employment. It will lead to higher GDP. I hope you remember the concept of virtuous cycle. You can expect that. But in case of India, private sector borrowing as a percentage of GDP through the corporate bond is just 18%, which means you need to develop this particular corporate bond market. So these are some of the very important points regarding corporate bond market. Now finally, what kind of reforms have been taken by RBI then? What has RBI done in order to promote all of this? I'll explain. There are two very important reforms. Follow this very carefully. RBI has started promoting issuance of new types of bonds. RBI has started promoting issuance of new types of bonds. What kind of bonds are we talking about? Have you heard of masala bonds? If you have been reading the newspapers or even read our CNA, you will know it. Right? Have you heard of masala bonds? Of course, yes. 20 years ago, there was no concept of masala bond. It is very much relevant today. Have you heard of green bonds? Very much relevant today. So RBI is promoting issuance of new types of bonds in the market. Second very important reform, RBI introduced a tool by the name of targeted long-term repo operations. Targeted long-term repo operations. TLTRO, targeted long-term repo operation. Right? What do you mean by targeted long-term repo operations? Let me explain it to you. Under TLTRO, RBI would be providing loans to banks. Under TLTRO, RBI will provide loans to banks. Now many of you will say, sir, what is new in that? RBI gives loans to banks under bank rate, under repo rate. There are many ways through which RBI will give loans. What is the speciality? Follow the next points very carefully. RBI will give this particular loan to the banks for a duration 1 to 3 years. For a duration 1 to 3 years, and will charge repo rate. Will charge repo rate of interest on these particular loans. But the speciality about this particular money or the loan that is given to banks is the banks are supposed to use this to purchase corporate bonds only. I'll repeat the statement. The banks are supposed to use this loan, that is the amount of money, to purchase corporate bonds only. Can a bank borrow under this particular route, that is a targeted long-term repo operation, and use it to invest in shares? Not allowed. Can they give a loan to you and me to purchase a home? Not allowed. The banks are supposed to take a loan and use it only to purchase corporate bonds. This tool is called as TLTRO, Targeted Long-Term Repo Operations. So these are certain very important reforms that have been taken by RBI in recent times to promote corporate bond market. Now finally, a question here. One of the sustainable ways to promote development of infrastructure and corporate growth is to finance them through debt instruments. What are the issues of corporate bond market in India? Elaborate in 250 words. Elaborate in 250 words. This is a descriptive question. Let me go to the next important point or important concept. One nation, one ration card has completed 3 years. But before that, let me take up certain questions from your side. Do development of corporate bond market will have a money multiplier effect? They can, if they start investing a lot of money and the money enters into banking sector. If corporate will have other choices to borrow from, won't it reduce the loans taken from the banks? That is what we want to do. Thus reducing their profits and posing another challenge of the banking sector? Not necessarily. Why? Now the banks are suffering because of asset liability mismatch, ALM. And we want to address the asset liability mismatch. I'll give you another example. Let me know, right, whether you have heard of this or not. Have you people read or heard about NABFID? Have you people heard or read about NABFID? National Bank for Financing Infrastructure Development. Very, very important, by the way. National Bank for Financing Infrastructure Development. The most important function of NABFID is to provide the loans or to promote development of infrastructure. Provide credit for development of infrastructure. Now your argument can be applied here also. If NABFID starts providing the loans for development of infrastructure, what will the banks do? The banks are already taking a lot of risk. We want to reduce that risk. That is the reason we are doing all of this. Done? Okay, let me go to the next one here. ONORC, one nation, one ration card. Sir, please write the long form. Long form is here. One nation, one ration card. The idea of one nation, one ration card was implemented by the government in August 2019. In August 2019, Government of India implemented one nation, one ration card. What was the basic concept of ONORC? Imagine here is a migrant labor. Here is a migrant labor who has moved from state 1 to state 2. They have moved from S1 to S2. He is registered, he is identified or recognized as a beneficiary under National Food Security Act in the state 1. But because they are searching for a job, because they are moving for a livelihood, he has moved from S1 to S2. Now he is recognized, right, as a beneficiary in S1, not in second state. Don't you think because he is not recognized as a beneficiary, this migrant labor will not be able to purchase subsidized food grains in S2? Let me know if there is a problem related to this. He is recognized as a NFSA beneficiary, National Food Security Act beneficiary in the state 1. Sir, how come? Right? How come he is recognized there? Simple. recognition of the beneficiaries is done by state government. I'll repeat it. Recognition of the beneficiaries is done by state government. So he is recognized as a beneficiary here, but not here. So he will not be able to purchase food grains in the second state. In order to address this, Government of India in 2019 introduced One Nation, One Ration card. Under ONORC, what they will do is, they will provide, or whatever data is there of the beneficiaries, all of this data is put in a single server, right, in a simple computer. Now imagine here is a migrant ABC. He has moved from, right, the state 1 to state 2. Now when he goes to state 2, he can provide, let's say, Aadhaar identification, that is, let's say, biometric authentication, and prove that he is a beneficiary. He is one of the beneficiaries under NFSA. So now he is identified as a beneficiary in the second state also. He'll be able to purchase the food grains at subsidized prices in the second state also. This is the basic idea of One Nation, One Ration card. In addition to this, understand what is the current status of ONORC? It has been implemented in all the 36 states. Remember this. It has been implemented in all the 36 states. And by the way, Assam became the 36th state plus union territory in India to implement ONORC. Right? Remember this. Assam has become the last state, that is, out of 36 states plus UTs, Assam is the 36th one to implement ONORC. The department is also collaborating. It is negotiating with other ministries and departments so as to use this network now. We have set up a network to implement ONORC. Can we use it for other welfare schemes? We are negotiating that. Third, we also have set up a new app, Mera Ration app. Right? Remember this. We have also set up a new app, Mera Ration app. And under the Mera Ration app, right, remember, all of this information is available to you if you are a beneficiary. Right? What about the information here? You can know how much is your NFSA entitlement. You can find out whichever is the nearest ration shop for you. You can find out, right, the eligibility, how much you have basically purchased in the last 6 transactions. So a lot of information you as a beneficiary can get from the Mera Ration app or My Ration app. This is the current status. And what has been the achievement of NFSA? These are the achievements. First one, since 2019, more than 77 crore transactions have taken place. More than 3.5 crore transactions happen on monthly basis interstate. That is, a migrant labor, a person has moved from one state to another state, and in the second state he is able to get the entitlement or subsidized food grains. So 3.5 crore transactions of such nature are taking place. Right? NFSA transactions are more than 60%, because remember this, apart from NFSA, there is also one more scheme of the central government, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. I'll repeat the statement. Apart from NFSA, there is one more scheme by the name of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. So there are transactions, 40% of the transactions are for this, and remaining 60% are of NFSA itself. Now these are some of the factors, or let's say facts, which have been given by the government to prove that ONORC is a big success. It is a very big success, they say. But are there any challenges? Are there any problems related to the One Nation, One Ration card? Let me explain this. Under One Nation, One Ration card, the first very important problem will be connectivity issue. Connectivity issue, that is internet issue. Sir, what do you mean by this? Right? Imagine I'm one of the beneficiaries. I've moved from state 1 to state 2. I want to purchase subsidized food grains in the second state. So I will go to the second state ration shop. I want to provide my thumbprint. What if there is no internet connectivity? I hope you understand this. What if there is no internet connectivity? Right? Don't you think that's a problem? Of course, yes. Sir, what if there is an internet connection and the server is not working? I hope you understand this. What if there is an internet connection and the server is not working? That is also a problem. So connectivity problems are persisting. That's a first issue. Second very important issue. Whenever ration cards are issued, understand this. Whenever ration cards are issued, ration cards will have the members, all the family members' data. Imagine there is a house and there are 5 people in the house. One ration card is issued for all the 5 people. For all the 5 people, only one ration card is issued. Now, let's say out of 5 people, one person will go from state 1 to state 2. Now, if this one person carries the ration card, what will the remaining 4 people do when they want to purchase in the ration shop? And if this one person doesn't carry the ration card, don't you think, despite being entitled, despite being an eligible beneficiary, he will not be able to get access to food grains? Any problem related to this, let me know. Any problem related to this explanation, let me know. Some of you are saying, sir, there are 28 states, but you wrote 36. My dear, please have a look at it. It is not just states, it is plus union territories. Right? Please have a look at it very, very carefully. So second one is the issue of ration card itself. And very recently, there was a survey which was conducted in Gujarat. And it was found that some of the beneficiaries travel back all the way to their villages because the ration card is there with the remaining members in the family. They will go to the villages, then purchase the entitlement. And if this is happening, right, if this is happening, what will happen? The whole concept of ONORC is getting defeated. The whole idea of ONORC was, you are moving like this. Even if you move, I will provide food grains wherever you go. But is it happening now? No, it is not happening. Third very important challenge here is, many of the people who you are targeting, for ONORC, these are illiterates. They do not have educational qualifications. They do not have financial qualifications or financial knowledge. They do not have digital literacy also. So you want them to use digital ration app. You want them to provide their biometrics. They are afraid of it. Because they don't know how the IT works, that is information technology works. They'll simply say, no, 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 I will not give you my thumbprint. Why should I give you a thumbprint? I will not give it. So there is problems with respect to, right, teaching these people, because they do not have sufficient information. They will not accept this. Fourth very important concern. Next, fourth very important concern. It has been found that many of the beneficiaries do not want to use ONORC. I'll repeat the statement. Many of these beneficiaries do not want to use ONORC. They don't want to use. Why? They simply say, I'm in a city. I can get livelihood somewhere. I will get a wage somewhere. I will earn. I will have sufficient amount of money. I can purchase food grains. But it is my family who is sitting in village. They do not have money. Let them purchase all the food grains in the village itself using the ration card. And many of the beneficiaries, they are concerned that, migrant labor by the way, they are concerned that if I bring a ration card to the city, I might lose it. I might simply lose it, or somebody will steal it from me. In such a cases, it becomes a hassle for me. It is a problem for me in order to get one more ration card. And that is the precise reason they are not bringing the ration cards. They are not utilizing one nation, one ration card initiative of the government. Right? So these are some of the challenges that the government is facing in terms of implementation of ONORC scheme. Done. Let me go to the next one. Right. Again, the same concept what I've discussed. Before that, a question on this. ONORC was implemented to provide benefit to the migrant workers. However, it has not completely succeeded in meeting the original objectives. Elaborate in 250 words. Okay, elaborate in 250 words. So the last article for the day, GST has completed 5 years. Now before that, let me take up certain questions from your side. If another give ration card to people of different states, like large populated state, where there is a large number of migration, it may create burden on the state. How state will get compensation? That is the precise reason under ONORC what we are trying to do is, we are trying to measure how much is the migration on yearly basis like this, so that the states will have sufficient amount of food grains to provide to the migrant beneficiaries. We are doing that, right? That is the advantage related to ONORC. We are trying to, on real-time basis, find out how many people are moving into which cities so that sufficient food grains are available in the ration shops. Can ration card link with Aadhaar card? Yes, it can be linked. But again, the question is the same thing. Can you convince these particular people who do not have financial literacy as well as a digital literacy to do that? Right? Can you convince them? Can you convince them to use these kind of tools of the government? Sir, half of the problem may be solved if you issue another temporary ration card. How will you do that? Lakhs of people migrate in India. Lakhs and lakhs of people migrate from one area to another area, one state to another state in India. And that's very, very difficult to do. Very, very difficult. Okay. So the challenges of ONORC. I'll repeat the statement. One, the people, that is a migrant labor, do not have digital literacy, financial literacy, right? Very difficult to bring them and ask them to use these kind of tools. You want them to provide the thumbprint, they will not give it. You want them to download Mera Ration app, they will not do it. Very difficult. Second, many of the times these migrant labor do not bring the ration card because they're concerned that it might be lost. And if it is lost, again they will have to go back, right, run through government officials, get a new ration card. They don't want to do that. Third, there is a problem in terms of internet connection. The server is busy. In such cases, even though ONORC has been implemented, the scheme implementation or the effectiveness is reduced. Fourth, generally the ration cards is a given to house. It is given to a house, not to individually everyone. In a ration card, imagine there are 5 people in a house who are listed. If I am one of them, if I go to a city in search of a livelihood, if I take the ration card with me, what will the remaining 4 people do in the village? Don't you think they'll find it very difficult to get the access to ration? And if I go and leave the ration card here, I will not be able to purchase ration there. So that becomes a problem. And many of the times, there was a survey conducted, many of the times, the migrant labor itself says, I don't want to take the ration card because I want my family who is there in the village to purchase the rations there itself. I will earn the wages here. I will purchase the ration here. Let my family who are dependent on me, let them purchase in the village. So these are some of the concerns regarding the idea of ration, or that is one nation, one ration card. The final topic for the day, GST has completed 5 years. Right? I'm pretty sure all of you know this. GST was implemented from 1st July 2017. Has been in force from 1st July 2017. So obviously we have completed 5 years of GST. So what has been the outcome? I will not discuss the features. Features is not the concept here. Feature is not the focus here. Features is the basic discussion. I want to discuss current affairs. What is the evaluation of GST? Now let's have a look at the evaluation part. What has worked in the GST? If we have implemented GST for 5 years now, what actually has worked out for us? First, GST Council, the concept is a very big success. Why? Please understand this. In the GST Council, the composition is central government plus state government. I hope you understand this. GST Council is a constitutional body set up under Article 279A. It is a constitutional body. Now, the function of the GST Council is simply anything to do with the GST. Anything to do with the GST, for example, what kind of goods and services should be covered? What should be the rate of GST? Should the good be moved out of the GST? Anything to do with the GST is decided by the GST Council. And that is the beauty of the council here. Both the center as well as the state government have come together. It is an example of cooperative federalism. Now let me ask you a simple question. GST Council, I said, is an example of cooperative federalism. Can any of you give me another example of cooperative federalism? Right, let me check. Right, GST Council is an example of cooperative federalism. Sir, what do you mean by cooperative federalism? Both the center and states have come together and they are implementing a measure. Any other example of a cooperative federalism? Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is an example of cooperative federalism. The another one, best example. So GST Council has worked, right? We have had more than 45 meetings of the GST Council. Most of the times, the council has decided based on the decision making process is basically everybody has agreed to whatever has been the business of the council. Right, so that is the first very important outcome, success under the GST. Second one, tax base has widened. Tax base has widened. Before the GST was implemented, there were around 6 million taxpayers. I repeat the statement. Before the GST was implemented, there were around 6 million taxpayers, registered companies for payment of taxes. But after the implementation of GST, the number of registered taxpayers under GST has more than doubled to 13 million. I'll repeat the statement. Before the implementation of GST, right, the argument was the number of taxpayers was, right, the 6 million. I'm talking about companies, by the way. But after the implementation of GST, the number of taxpayers has increased to more than 13 million. Now you'll ask me, sir, what do you mean by a tax base here? What do you mean by tax base? Tax base simply refers to assets, income, companies, etc., on which government can impose a tax. I'll repeat the statement here. What do you mean by tax base? It refers to assets or revenues or incomes or individuals or companies on whom government can impose a tax and collect the tax. That is called as a tax base. And with the implementation of GST, the number of taxpayers have increased. Meaning what? The tax base under GST has been widened. It has widened. Done. That is second very important fact. Remember this. Third one, cascading effect has been addressed. That's also very, very important point. Right? Cascading effect has been addressed. What do you mean by cascading effect? Whenever you impose a tax on a tax, I repeat, whenever in the system there is a tax on a tax, it is called as a cascading effect. But because under GST, at every step, there is an input tax credit. Understand this carefully. Because under GST, at every step, there is an input tax credit, there is no cascading effect. With introduction of GST, we have been able to address the issue of cascading effect. And next one, e-way bill system. We have introduced the concept of e-way bill system. Now you don't have to learn what is the e-way bill. Let me explain a very simple statement. Simple way. You have produced a good, let's say in state 1. You want to move the good and sell it in the second state. Earlier, understand this, earlier, whenever you wanted to move the goods like this, you were asked to stop at check post. You will have to stop at check post, submit all the documents, and then move to another state. And what is the problem? If you are asked to stop at multiple points like this, the time taken for transportation increases. The time taken increases. If you are supplying, let's say, raw materials, there is a delay in supplying of the raw materials. The cost of the transportation increases. Market prices will also increase. There was a problem here. And as per Government of India survey, around 25% of the total time taken by the trucks, I repeat, around 25% of the total time taken by the trucks was spent at check post itself. So what we have done under GST? We have eliminated the concept of a check post. Whenever you want to move from point A to point B, the goods like this, you need to generate a receipt. You need to generate a bill like this, and that is called as e-way bill. So with the introduction of the e-way bill system, there is no requirement of the check post now. Goods can be moved from one state to another state very easily. The delays have been reduced. Cost of transportation has been reduced. So these are some of the advantages, or let's say the successes, which we have been able to attain with implementation of goods and services tax in the last 5 years. Apart from this, certain factual information. 1,399 goods and services are covered under GST even today. Right? 37 goods are taxed at the highest rate, that is 28%. Highest monthly collection of the GST. Highest monthly collection of the GST is for the month of April 1.6 lakh crore rupees. And have a look at this data also. Have a look at this data. In the financial year 18, we collected 7 trillion rupees worth of GST. 19, 11.7. 2012, 11 in the next financial year, so on and so forth. Just for sake of information, I've given lot of data for GST for the last 5 years. So based on all of it, based on all the points that I've discussed right now, can we say that GST has been a success? Can we simply say that GST, there are no concerns, it has become a huge success in India? No. Please be very careful. Don't simply come to a conclusion, it is a huge success, there are no problems. Don't come to that conclusion. There are certain concerns, there are certain problems. Let's answer those. First one, we have multiple rates of GST. We have multiple rates of GST. What do you mean by multiple rates of GST? Under GST, we have 5% rate, 12%, 18%, and 28%. Is it okay? The most important slabs are the tiers 5, 12, 18, and 28%. Don't you think having multiple slabs is a problem? Having multiple rates like this is a problem. Why? More rates means more difficulty in terms of filing the returns. You will have to keep on accounting for everything like this. Even the government officials will feel the process is very complicated. Right? So the process moves very slowly like this. So one, the multiple rates is a problem. We will have to reduce it. Second, there is a problem of inverted duty structure. What is this inverted duty structure? Follow this very carefully. Imagine you're a manufacturer. You purchased a product and you paid a tax of 10 rupee. Then you will sell the product, collect the taxes from the buyer, let's say 15 rupees. You have paid 10 rupees in the previous step. In the second step, you have collected 15, you will give it to government. You will simply give it to government. This 10 rupee which has been collected from you will be returned back to you. It is called as input tax credit. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. In the first step, when you purchase raw materials, the government will collect 10 rupee from you. In the second step, when you will sell the product, you will collect taxes, give it to government, and whatever has been collected will be given back to you. This is called as input tax credit. But what generally happens is, in case of inverted duty structure, you are a manufacturer, you have purchased raw materials, you will pay, let's say 15 rupees. When you will sell the output, you will collect, let's say 10 rupees. Don't say, sir, both are one and the same. Both are not one and the same. What is the difference here? In case of the first example, the taxes that you have given to the government, when you purchase raw materials, the taxes that you have given to government is lesser than the taxes that you collected and then transferred to the government. In the second case, the taxes that you have paid on the input is greater than, I repeat, the taxes that you have paid on the input is greater than the taxes you have collected on the output. This is called as inverted duty structure. Inverted duty structure. What is the problem with inverted duty structure? Whenever there is an inverted duty structure, more capital, that is more of your working capital, is stuck up with the government. I'll repeat the statement. More of your working capital is stuck up with the government. Right? So basically what will happen is, under inverted duty structure, which is still present in India, you have very less amount of money, but some of it will get stuck up with the government because they will take time to process input tax credit. If there is a delay in ITC, you will receive delay, but more of your money is with the government. That is the problem. Third one, dispute resolution. Lot of disputes are there regarding GST. For example, imagine you are a tax official. I'm a manufacturer. I submitted certain documents. You say that, no, you are not supposed to calculate it like this. You are supposed to count it like this. There is a dispute between the tax official as well as the taxpayer. There are a lot of disputes which are pending. And that is the precise reason I'll add a current affairs point here. Very recently, a committee which was set up by the GST Council has recommended that we must have a GST appellate tribunal. Remember this. It is yet to be set up. The committee has recommended that we must have a GST appellate tribunal, right, with the principal bench in New Delhi. That has been the recommendation, yet to be implemented. Fourth very important concern here. Under GST, we are yet to cover all the goods and services. For example, alcohol yet to be covered. Fuels, petrol, diesel, etc. yet to be notified with GST. So we are yet to cover all the goods and services under the GST itself. What about the revenues of the states? Right, the compensation period. There is a concept of compensation period. The compensation period was 5 years, and very recently, because the GST has been implemented for 5 years now, even the compensation period is over. Now the states are concerned, if the central government will not pay me the compensation, what will happen to my revenues? What will happen in the context of revenues that I'm going to collect if these are very, very low? So these are some of the very important concerns regarding GST. What is the way forward then? What should be your recommendations? One, the government has to rationalize GST. Remember this. Government has to rationalize GST. What do you mean by rationalization? Just now I've told you, we have a slabs of 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. You should not have so many rates. You need to reduce the number of rates. you need to rationalize a GST. Second, there is an inverted duty structure. The GST Council should rationalize this also, address the inverted duty structure. Ideas must also be addressed. Otherwise, precious working capital of the companies will get stuck up under the ITC system. Third very important recommendation. What is the problem? We'll address that only. Third very important recommendation is Government of India should provide a new compensation formula to the states. Government of India should provide a new compensation formula. How? What will be the mechanism? That is left to the government. Let them decide, but it should be provided because the states are concerned about it. Done. So these are some of the recommendations that you can provide in order to rationalize, or let's say make GST a much better tool or a much better reform under the indirect taxes. Now I'll give a question, last question by the way. Though 5 years of GST implementation is over, it is still said to be neither good nor simple tax. In this regard, what are the issues plaguing GST? And suggest measures, suggest reforms for GST. So these are, right, this is a question. You're supposed to write the answer in 250 words. Right, so this is the question related to the fifth concept of discussion here, that is the idea of GST. Now, before I wind up this particular discussion, if you have questions, ask it, I will address them. So how GST has helped in increasing the tax base? Imagine you are selling a raw material to me. I will ask you for a bill now. It's simple. I will ask for a bill. And that particular bill should have your GST registration number. Now, if you want to have a registration number, you are supposed to be registered. So that is how the registrations have increased from 6 million to more than 13 million. That is the answer. As GST is a destination-based tax, does the government compensate the source states for the loss? No. GST no doubt is a destination-based tax, but what you're assuming is state 1 will produce the good. In the state 2, the good will be consumed. Your assumption is that only state 2 will get all the GST, that is SGST component, nothing will go to state 1. But you're simply considering only one situation. What if there is one more state, S3, which will produce the good and sell it to S1? Now, who will get the SGST component? State 1. What if S2 will produce a good, sell it in S1? Who will get the SGST component? S1. Right? So, this is a basic idea. Don't be confused. Don't simply say states are going to lose revenues. No, they are not going to lose revenues. Can we say that inverted duty structure arises when taxes on raw materials is more than that on final product? If you simply say raw material and final product, that would be a confusing statement, because what would happen if there is a manufacturer 1, they have purchased raw materials, they will sell it to M2, another manufacturer, who will sell it to M3, and who will sell it to customer. Customer will purchase the final product. Customer will purchase the final product. As per your statement, tax here is greater than tax here, will be misleading. Rather than that, simply say inverted duty structure means the tax rate on the input is greater than the tax rate on the output. I'll repeat the statement. Inverted duty structure simply means the tax rate on the input is greater than the tax rate on the output. That is inverted duty structure. Okay. How can we address the issues of inverted duty structure? Right, the Government of India, to be more precise here, GST Council already in some of the sectors, for example, footwear. Right, I hope you understand this. In the sector of footwear, earlier there was inverted duty structure. Government, that is the GST Council, already has taken measures there. What is the measure? Change the GST rates. Simple, change the GST rate. If it is 18% and 12% like this, that obviously it will lead to inverted duty structure. change the rates so that inverted duty structure can be addressed. Petrol and diesel are part of the GST, but yet to be notified under GST. Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Right? Why? Reason is simple. Right now, the central government plus state government have a huge rate of tax on petrol and diesel. Have a huge rate of tax. And the highest rate of tax under GST is, by the way, 28%. So even if you bring them under the GST, what is the rate of taxation you will impose? That is the challenge. That's a challenge. And that's the reason they are yet to implement, right? Or they are yet to announce the GST rate on fuels in India. It is not just petrol and diesel, even aviation turbine fuel, it's the same. Natural gas, it's the same. It's the same. Why would they sell at a loss in inverted duty structure? There is no loss, my dear. Don't be confused. There is no loss here. What is the meaning here in the inverted duty structure? You purchased a raw material, you paid more tax compared to the next step where you will collect lesser amount of taxes. Whatever taxes you have paid in the previous step, you will be given back that amount. Government will give you back that amount. That is not a concern here. Concern is, what if government takes 1 month, 2 months to give you that amount? You have very less amount of money already to invest. In that, some of the money is stuck up in the form of ITC. Don't you think that becomes a problem? That is a concern related to inverted duty structure. Dispute resolution. A taxpayer, let's imagine company and the authority, there is a dispute between both of them. They will go to court. Lot of disputes are pending like this. And in order to address this, the committee which was set up by the GST Council has recommended that we must have a GST appellate tribunal with a principal bench in the New Delhi. Apart from that, in larger states, we must have five benches of the appellate tribunal. Okay, so done then. So this is a discussion of 5 very important concepts, or let's say current affairs issues, which were there in the discussion in the month of August. Next week, right, again, right, another paper will be taken for the discussion, GS paper, by the way. And in the next one, again, we will give you the compilation of, let's say, the very important 5 topics from Indian economy, which were there in the discussion in the month of September. We'll have a threadbare, complete discussion like this on all of these particular 5 topics. So that's it from my side. Take care. See you again in the next class.